families. We're losing our families. We're making big money, but we're losing our families. We're proving our point. We've flipped our necks. We've told everybody off. We've run them all off. But we're losing our families. We're losing our families. We're losing our families. We're losing our families. We are losing our families altogether. The very breath is being pushed out of many men. Very breath pushed out of them. I cannot tell you how many men come to me miserable, married and miserable, at their wits' end, trying to be a Christian, hate to come home, driving in circles around the house, trying to think of a good reason to come in his own house. And may I pause just a moment and explain to women something that you probably never hear men say, because some men are not articulate enough to say it, some are not thoughtful enough to speak it, and most are too private to admit it. But it is real hard to be a man. Now you have a whole lot of materials and information that undergirds the challenges you go through, and I'm not minimizing what you go through at all, because you go through a whole lot. But just let me tell you, just so that you will know, since you have never spent not one day as a man, let me inform you quite clearly and emphatically that it is hard to be a man. That's why most give up on it, most quit, most faint from it, most fall because of it, and almost all of us die trying to do it. That is why we get lost in the journey of becoming what we were created to be. We get lost in the process. Some as early as 15 and 16 years old get lost in the maze of masculinity. Some make it to 30 and collapse up under a bush of despair. The woman processes externally, so whatever the woman's worried about, that's why she wants to talk about it. Fellas, you have to understand that women process by communicating, by talking. When something's really bothering her, she wants to talk about it. Men process internally. The more something, listen sisters, this is real important, the more something bothers us, the less we say about it. When a man is really worried and really upset and really frustrated, this is what he says. Absolutely nothing, because what you do externally, we do internally. We go in our cave to process the issue, and because you think that we don't care because we don't verbalize, you say we are not emotional. Here's the problem: we go inside to process, you go outside to process. Here's the problem though: sometimes men go in and we can't get back out. And we get trapped on the inside because we can't find a solution. And when a man can't find a solution, he becomes imprisoned. I want to tell you what's dangerous. The most dangerous thing that can happen to a man is for him to be imprisoned. Solitary confinement. The very first thing that God teaches us about men, he says it is not good for a man to be alone, because it is not good for man to be alone. You can take a serial killer, a murderer, a man who kills without any thought about it, somebody who can fight, kick you in your head and kill your unborn children. But if you put him in solitary confinement, he starts whimpering like a baby and crying in the night, because it is not good for man to be alone. And the truth of the matter is, there are men all around this room who went in their cave to process something years ago. Some of them went in the cave in their boyhood trying to figure out why their father didn't stay. Some of them went in the cave over their first wife who left them. Some of them went in the cave over the job that fired them, and they've been stuck in solitary confinement for years. And the only reason he's on drugs, in sin, searching the internet in the middle of the night is because it's not good for man to be alone. And if that boy at 15 or 50 gets locked into solitary confinement, he will become emotionally detached and unglued because he cannot get out. And when a man can't get out, all he does is bring his toys into his cave to keep him comfort in his pain. And it's not the toys that have him addicted, it is the gross loneliness of having no one who understands the dream that died on your way to masculinity. So my sisters and my brothers, I came to blow the whistle and sound the alarm and tell you that there are men in this room And at your dinner table, going to your school, they are your sons, your husbands, your boyfriends, and your lovers, and they are secretly dying in their cave. They are in solitary confinement. They are alone, and they do not tell you because they cannot speak. He is in solitary confinement, and a man can be alone and in confinement and have sex and make love and make babies and make house payments and car payments and give you money to get your hair did and your nails did and everything else did and still be in a cave of confinement. Sex is no sign that he's happy. I was amazed by this woman who told me, she said, "Pastor, I cannot believe it. He gave me roses for our anniversary, and 2 weeks later he asked me for a divorce. How could he be happy?" And 2 weeks later he wanted a divorce. And I thought, what about them roses made you think he was happy? He wasn't happy. He was responsible. He knew it was the date. He's a performer. He gives you what you expect, but that is no sign that he is satisfied. It is not good for man to be alone. We don't do alone well. We don't do alone well. Some men are so afraid of being alone while the relationship is falling apart. He reaches out and gets a woman on hold. So he's got her on standby like a spare tire. He gives her just enough love to keep her hanging on. It's not that he wants her, it's that he doesn't want to be alone. Why would a preacher stop preaching for a minute and go this deep into personal relationships? I'm glad you asked. I'll tell you why. 80% of the suicides that occur in this country are committed by men. 80%, not 50, not 60, not 45. 80% of the people who drive cars off cliffs or stick guns in their mouth and blow their brains out are men. Men, 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 men. Men are 3 times more likely to commit suicide in the middle of their lives, their 40s and 50s, than any other time. Men, 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 to get to the middle of their lives and suddenly decide, I'm not going to get out of this maze. I'm not going to get out. When I was teaching this in my church, one young man stood up and he said, "Pastor, I hear you. I understand you. I'm glad you're teaching on this." He said, "But I just want to know one thing." I said, "What, son?" He said, "Will I ever be happy? Will I ever be happy?" He said, "I think I could hold on if I knew that someday I would be happy." And he said, "I just want to know, will I ever be happy?" He said, "I'm not talking about pleasing other people and bringing my truck over to help grandmama move and fixing somebody's flat tire and being there for every crisis in everybody's life and being everybody's Superman." He said, "I'm not talking about performing and putting on airs and making points on the team of life." He said, "I just want to know, will I ever be happy?" Me, not make other folks happy. Will I ever be happy? And so they die, and they die. And when we die with our lips closed. Because we are taught not to say anything. At little ages, they tell us, "Come on, Junior, big boys don't cry. Suck it up, boy, suck it up, suck it up." So we suck it so far up, we asphyxiate and die. And the light can go out in his eye 10 years before his body leaves your house. And you think he got divorced the day the decree was final. He's been divorced for 10 years and you never knew it. Speaking of losing men, I'm going to tell you something powerful. You're losing the men in the turns. My brother rides a motorcycle. Zoom, zoom, zoom. He gets on the back of that, and his wife her name is Sharon. We call her Ellie Mae. She gets on the back of the Harley with him, and there is zoom, zoom, zoom. My brother says to me, he said, "Let me tell you something, Tommy." He said, "I'm on a motorcycle with Sharon, and we're driving down the road." He said, "We're doing good in the straightaway. We flying, man." He said, "The wind is blowing." He said, "You need to be on a motorcycle. It's a wonderful thing. The wind is blowing. You feel young again." And we're going through traffic, and we're having a great time. He said, "But when we get to the turn," he said, "Sharon almost killed me in the turn." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "See," he said, "when you get in the turn and you're riding on the back of the motorcycle, when you get in the turn, you got to move when I move." And when he hung up the phone, I said, "Oh, wait a minute, I got to start writing again, because you just gave me a point." He gave me an illustration to explain to women where we are losing our sons and how we are losing our husbands and how you're losing men. You're not losing us in the straightaway. You're not losing us in the straightaway. As long as everything is straight and normal and predictable, we do real good. It's in the turns. When you go this way and I go that way, you're losing us in the turns. When it's my turn, you have to move the way I move. You have to deal with it the way I deal with it. If I don't come unglued, you can't come unglued. If I'm quiet, you got to be quiet. When I get ready to talk, you got to be ready to talk, because this is my turn and you're losing us in the turns. I'm going to identify some turns for you. Can I do that? If he's a man who loves to work and is responsible and take care of himself, and all of a sudden he loses his job, for him it's a crisis. He's in the middle of a turn. He becomes somber, silent, quiet, reserved, angry, confused, intimidated, and he's in a turn. You got to be careful what you say to him right now. You got to be careful how you react to him right now. He's sensitive, he's vulnerable, he's in the middle of a turn. If he gets to the middle of his life and he's got crisis with the kids and his parents are dying, now he's in a turn. Death is a turn that's unbelievable. If he develops a sickness in his life, something goes wrong in his body, he's in the middle of a turn. And if you're gonna make it in the marriage to 50 years and 60 years, you got to be careful. It ain't the straightaways where you're losing us, it's in the turns. When he gets in a turn, you can't let your mouth take over the situation. You got to flow the way he flows, because he's in a turn, and you will lose your son or your husband or your boyfriend or your father. You'll lose him in the turns, and you'll never even know that he fell off and you're riding the bike alone.